The moment shocked everyone when the 83-year-old mother of Sean Diddy Combs, Janice Combs, walked to the witness chair. The entire federal courtroom in Manhattan became completely quiet, even though he stayed calm throughout the trial. Diddy now looked clearly nervous. His lawyers shared worried glances with each other. The prosecution sat up straighter. Everything was going to change right now. If you're watching us for the first time, please press the like button and follow our channel so we can share all the newest information about major court cases like this one. Our coverage is complete and focuses on real facts, different from anything else available. Nobody expected Diddy's mother would speak in court. The tension in the room was very high because of the day's shocking events. As she slowly walked to the front of the courtroom to make her promise, everyone stared at the elderly woman. People in the gallery gasped loudly. It appeared that even the judge looked surprised. Janice Combs, who had stood by her son through his decades of success, was now prepared to speak under oath. There had been no advance notice or alert. Until this moment, Diddy had appeared confident during the trial, smiling at supporters in the audience and chatting with his attorneys regularly. But now a change had happened. Maybe it was seeing his mother, who had always been his biggest supporter, speaking as a witness for the prosecution. Perhaps it was knowing that his closest ally was about to expose him. Maybe it was understanding that his carefully planned defense was going to crumble. Whatever it was, Diddy had stopped pretending. He no longer sat there like a celebrity. As a son, he watched his mother prepare to reveal the truth about him. The courtroom was not ready for what Janice Combs would say. When she began talking, the shocking things his mother shared, including their private conversations, her growing concerns over the years, and the reality she could no longer deny, had a devastating effect on more than just his case. It was a mother's heartbreaking discovery of who her son really was. The first day of the trial started like all the rest. Quiet voices filled the room as everyone waited for the day's events to begin. Reporters sat in their assigned spots, and lawyers whispered about strategies. United States calls Janice Combs, the prosecutor announced, and the mood in the room completely changed. Could hear a pin drop. Opponents saw this as a desperate move, while supporters viewed it as a mistake. Janice Combs' straight posture, which stayed perfect despite her old age, and the strength in her eyes showed her determination as she walked to the platform. Diddy, who had been looking at documents with his lawyers, looked like he had been struck. The judge raised an eyebrow. His face turned completely pale. His fingers, which had been turning through papers confidently, stopped moving in the middle of what he was doing. Without looking at anyone, Janice Combs took her place in the witness chair. Despite her son's shocked and hurt expression, she barely looked at him. "Mrs. Combs, thank you for coming here today," the prosecutor said. "I know how hard this must be." Janice Combs nodded slightly, showing her amazing calmness in this difficult situation. The entire trial shifted when the judge allowed her to continue. Why? Because the words Janice Combs was about to speak didn't come from any media story. Wasn't rumors from people who had worked with or known the company before. She had raised him, celebrated his wins, and defended him from critics for decades. This was her story. Diddy's lawyer quickly objected, claiming family conversations were private. The prosecution argued that talks between a mother and her adult son are not legally protected, especially when they involve accusations of wrongdoing. The court rejected the objection and told Mrs. Combs to continue. After a brief discussion, no one said a word in the courtroom. The reporters stared at their keyboards, but had stopped typing. Court sketch artists had paused with their pencils. Hanging above the paper, the prosecution team kept neutral faces. But Diddy's family members in the gallery looked shocked and confused. After fixing her glasses, Janice Combs looked directly at the prosecutor. "I've been asked to speak about conversations I've had with my son over the years and about actions I've seen that worried me. I'm here because I believe the truth must be told, no matter how much it hurts." A low whisper filled the courtroom. Diddy himself tugged at his sleeve, pulling down his lead attorney, who had stood up to object again. It was like he had mentally prepared himself to hear what was coming, because of the witness's old age and the emotional difficulty of her testimony. The prosecutor approached very carefully. Mrs. Combs, could you please tell the court about your relationship with your son? Despite how serious the situation was, Janice Combs took a deep breath and spoke. The words that followed would forever change one of the most famous criminal trials in recent history. I raised Sean as a single mother after his father was killed when he was just a child, she said. I worked many jobs to support him, to give him chances I never had. I wanted him to be strong, to be successful, to make something of himself. And he did that. He went beyond every dream I had for him. As she spoke, she remembered the happiness she felt watching her son's amazing rise. From intern to music executive, producer to performer, businessman to millionaire, as she thought back on his youthful energy and determination, her face became softer. According to her, Sean was always charming, always a leader, even as a boy. Even as a boy, he could persuade anyone of anything. He had that special ability, she added, her expression slowly brightening to a small smile. She turned her head slightly toward the jury as she spoke. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Success came so quickly, so completely. Suddenly, everyone was saying yes to him. Everyone wanted something from him. Everyone treated him like he was above the rules that applied to regular people. And I started to see him believe it, remembering Diddy's peak years in the early 2000s. The prosecutor gently guided her through her memories. Janice Combs described the worrying patterns in her son's behavior that she noticed, his growing control over others, his angry outbursts when challenged, and his casual disregard for personal boundaries. I blamed the pressure at first, she said. The entertainment business can be harsh, and he was dealing with so much. But then I started hearing things, seeing things when I visited his homes. Young women who seemed confused, staff who appeared scared of him, rooms I wasn't allowed to enter. One visit to his Miami home in 2008 stood out to her. She spoke up and said, "I arrived without calling first." This made several people in the audience laugh nervously. Mothers can do that. There had been a party the night before. When I walked in, there were staff cleaning up, but they seemed different, not the normal after-party cleanup. They were gathering phones from different rooms. One young woman was crying while a security guard walked her out. She hadn't called ahead, and Sean was furious when he saw her. The prosecutor showed Mrs. Combs a photograph. "Do you recognize this place?" She nodded as she studied it. "This is the pool house at Sean's Los Angeles home. He turned it into what he called a studio around 2010, but he was very secretive about it. I wasn't allowed inside, which seemed strange to me. I had always been welcome everywhere in his homes before that." She continued to talk about how her worries grew and how she tried to discuss them with her son. Then she spoke with more confidence, saying, "Mothers do that too." I asked questions, but he would dismiss me, tell me I didn't understand how things worked in his world, that everything was agreed to, that it was just the lifestyle of the music industry. The prosecutor asked about specific conversations. "Did your son ever discuss with you accusations made against him by women?" Janice Combs gave a slow nod. "Yes. When the first accusations started appearing publicly around 2017, I called him right away. Any mother would. I asked him directly if there was any truth to them. He told me they were lying, that they wanted money, that this happened to all successful men in the industry." She paused with a clear sign of tiredness. I believed him. Wanted to believe him? He was my son. The prosecutor's next question was, "And did something happen to change that belief?" Her answer was a quiet yes, as her voice became softer. In late 2023, after Cassie filed her lawsuit, I confronted him. Again, we were alone in his apartment in New York. I told him I needed to hear the truth, not what his lawyers were telling him to say, not what he was telling the public. Just the truth between a mother and son. As she continued, the entire courtroom became silent. He was different that day. Tired, perhaps. The mask slipped a little. He didn't admit everything, but he said something I'll never forget, "Mom. You don't build what I've built by playing by everyone else's rules. Sometimes people get hurt. That's business." For the first time, her voice shook slightly. "That's not how I raised him. That's not business. It's not right." Diddy stayed completely still during the whole testimony, staring at the table. His lawyers took notes quickly, occasionally leaning in to whisper under their breath. Focused on the truth of his mother's words, Diddy seemed to be beyond their reach. Janice Combs went on to explain how her concerns became more urgent in early 2024 with the release of the security camera footage showing Diddy attacking Cassie in a hotel hallway. I called him immediately after seeing that video. Devastated. Doesn't begin to describe it. I asked him how he could do such a thing. Told me it was a difficult time in their relationship, that I was only seeing one moment out of context, that he wasn't that person anymore. The prosecutor asked, "Did you believe him?" "No," was her direct response. "Not anymore." Because I had seen glimpses of that anger myself over the years. Never directed at me, but at staff, at business partners. The Sean in that video wasn't a stranger to me, and that realization broke my heart. She continued to say that the more she testified, the more she realized that the accusations against her son were too consistent to be ignored. There were lists of women's names with comments like handled and potential problem next to them at his home office. She found disturbing during a visit in early 2024. When I asked him about it, he took the paper from my hands and told me it was business. Nothing for me to worry about, according to her. But the look in his eyes, I knew. As a mother, you know when your child is hiding something, even when they're grown. The prosecutor brought out another exhibit and moved forward. "Mrs. Combs, I'm showing you what has been marked as Government Exhibit 42. Do you recognize this document?" Her careful nod showed her examination of the page. "Yes. These are notes I began keeping after that conversation. I started writing down things I had witnessed over the years, conversations we'd had, behaviors that concerned me. I couldn't ignore it anymore." "Why did you begin keeping these notes?" "Because I was afraid I was losing perspective, that my love for my son was clouding my judgment. Writing it all down helped me see the pattern more clearly. And what I saw terrified me." Diddy looked up at his mother for the first time since she took the stand, and they made eye contact. There was a brief but powerful exchange between mother and son, a silent conversation that seemed to express unspoken hurt, betrayal, maybe even understanding. Janice Combs' determination was clear to see when she turned her attention back. To the prosecutor, "I love my son. That will never change. But I cannot pretend anymore. I cannot be silent anymore. Too many people have been hurt." The prosecutor considered the witness's emotional state before approaching. "Mrs. Combs, I want to ask you about a specific conversation you had with your son in April of this year. After his arrest, but before this trial began. Can you tell the court about that conversation?" As if preparing for the most difficult part of her testimony, Janice Combs adjusted herself in her chair. "Yes. I visited Sean at the detention center. It was just the two of us in a private room. They made special arrangements because of who he is," said the woman. "I told him that I needed to hear the truth, all of it, before I could continue supporting him publicly. I said, 'Sean, I'm your mother. I love you unconditionally, but I need to know what I'm standing behind.'" As she shared his reply, the entire courtroom fell into complete silence. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "The truth. The truth is, I created a world where I made the rules, where what I wanted happened, where people either played along or got pushed aside. Was it always right? No. Did people get hurt? Yes. But that's how power works. Ma, that's how it's always worked." She waited for a while to gather her thoughts before continuing. "I asked him about the specific allegations, the parties, the recordings, the drugs, the threats. I needed to hear him deny it if it wasn't true," according to the prosecution. "And did he deny it?" "No," was her straightforward response. "He said it's complicated. Everything was consensual at the beginning. Nobody was forced. But once you're in that world, the lines get blurred. Sometimes people change their minds later, but by then they'd already taken the money, the opportunities. They'd already benefited." Even as she went on, Janice Combs' hands trembled a little. "I told him that consent obtained through pressure, through fear of consequences, through intoxication that isn't real consent. To which he simply replied, "That's not how it works in my world." As time went on, Diddy's lawyers at the defense table looked more and more worried. Diddy turned his attention back to his mother while his lead attorney wrote a message and pushed it in his direction. The prosecutor applied gentle pressure. "Did your son ever explicitly admit to the criminal conduct he's charged with? Not in?" "Those words," said Janice Combs, "but he told me enough for me to understand the truth. Said the system I built worked for years. Everyone got what they wanted. It only became a problem when people decided to change the rules." She looked directly at the jury. "I raised my son to take responsibility for his actions, to be accountable. When he told me that, I knew he had lost his way. He wasn't seeing people as people anymore, just as pieces in a game he believed he controlled." Following that meeting, Janice Combs wrote a letter to her son, which the prosecutor presented as an additional exhibit. In it, she expressed her love for him without limits. But she was also very disappointed and refused to excuse actions which she now saw as harmful and wrong. As the prosecutor asked, "Did you receive a response to this letter?" Yes, was her response. "Sean called me. He was angry at first, then almost begging. He said I didn't understand what was at stake, that his whole life, everything he'd built was on the line. I told him that was exactly why I had to speak the truth, because lives were at stake, not only his." After that, the prosecutor wanted to know why she had decided to testify. "Mrs. Combs, what brought you here today? Why did you agree to testify?" In this case, a long pause was drawn out by Janice Combs. "Because the truth matters. Because accountability matters. Because I raised my son to be better than this. Because I believe that true love, a mother's love, means wanting your child to face the consequences of their actions so they can become better, not protecting them from those consequences and watching them become worse." Her gaze returned to her son, this time with more intensity. "I'm here because I love my son enough to tell the truth about him, even when that truth is painful. I'm here because the women who were hurt deserve someone to stand up and acknowledge their pain. And I'm here because Sean needs to understand that no amount of money, fame, or power places you above basic human decency." Something inside Diddy broke when she spoke these words. He dropped his shoulders. He finally let his carefully guarded confidence fall since the trial started. It was as if he were a child facing his mother's disappointment, the one judgment he had never been prepared to face, rather than a powerful music mogul. Mrs. Combs was thanked by the prosecutor, and she returned to her seat. During cross-examination, the defense attorney stood. Although he was very polite, almost kind, instead of trying to question her credibility or suggest that she had any hidden motives, he focused on showing that her evidence was based on assumptions and conversations, rather than direct observation of the alleged events. Janice Combs maintained her composure throughout the cross-examination, acknowledging the limitations of her testimony but remaining firm in its essential truth that her son had created and operated a system that exploited and hurt others, and that he had basically confessed this to her in private conversations. She hesitated, her gaze returning to her son as she was finally dismissed from the witness stand. Despite the lack of spoken words, the look expressed a mother's desire for redemption, as well as her disappointment and years of love. With her back straight and her dignity intact, she walked carefully past the defense table and left the courtroom. Diddy watched her leave, and his facial expressions revealed that of all the evidence presented throughout the trial, his mother's words had had the greatest impact on him. Nothing but the truth remained between a mother and her son once the masks were removed. Dr. Margaret Chen is a family psychology expert who has worked with cases involving famous public figures. The prosecution sought her testimony after Janice Combs testified. Once her qualifications were established, the prosecutor asked her to explain the significance of the previous testimony. "What we saw today was absolutely remarkable," Dr. Chen said. "In high-profile cases involving wealthy or famous defendants, we often see family members either staying silent or providing unwavering support regardless of the evidence. For a mother to testify as Mrs. Combs did represents a profound break from that pattern. From a psychological perspective, this suggests that Mrs. Combs reached what we call a moral tipping point, a moment when the mental conflict between loving her son and recognizing the harm he has caused became too great to maintain. The fact that she described a gradual awakening rather than a sudden realization lends significant credibility to her testimony. Janice Combs had described a pattern in which her son dismissed her concerns, used his job as an excuse, and acted as if the rules didn't apply to him. The prosecution wanted to know more about these dynamics. These are classic examples of what we call power insulation, Dr. Chen added. Individuals with extreme wealth, fame, and influence often become surrounded by people who reinforce their sense of exceptionalism and protect them from consequences. A mother is often the last person who can break through that insulation because she knew the individual before the power, before the wealth. She went into detail about how Diddy had supposedly told his mother things that revealed his perspective. Shaped by decades of his actions being accepted and justified,